Can you talk a little bit about how EFIP is trying to kind of lens out and take a wider view of what constitutes prosperity, what constitutes an input that economists need to take into account when they're trying to develop meta models?
Economists have been working on the climate transition issue for quite some time. But I think what has to happen, and to some extent has happened, and I think, that movement that I'm just going to talk about is indicative of the new perspective that EFIP brings, is to be more welcoming and more interested and curious about second-best approaches to solving some of our problems. And I think too often economists get enamored of first best. What is a climate problem? It's a problem of emissions. How do you solve emissions? You solve them by taxing emissions. And because this is a global public bad, then you have to do it at a global level. So we need global agreements on taxing emission or some kind of a global cap and trade. Now, the logic of this, of course, is quite correct. But I think any engagement with the real world and what actually has happened on the ground suggests that there are a much richer set of strategies, and some of which actually are bringing us much greater benefit and getting us faster. And in particular, it turns out that, something that economists had not paid any attention to at all in this climate transition space has been extremely productive. And that's green industrial policies that China has been engaged in renewables. I mean, China and other successful countries, including the United States, have engaged in industrial policy for a very long time. But intellectually, economists have been hesitant to get into these issues because it entails governments engaging in making decisions about resource allocation and so forth, as being very skeptical that that's something governments ought to do. Now, 15 years into intensive green industrial policies in China, the prices of renewables globally have collapsed by 95%. And now we're at the cusp of a transition to a green economy that even people who were extremely worried about climate transition are now finding some, shed of optimism that we might actually be able to leave to our grandchildren a habitable planet. We haven't won the war by any means, but the benefits are coming from tools and approaches that are non-standard, that are unorthodox, not incompatible with mainstream economic thinking, but as long as sort of we enlarge our look and consider a wider range of political economy and second best issues as well.